Good evening, all, and welcome to episode 18 of the Midweek Mixup podcast. And this week we have awesome special guests, Dlala Studios, with AJ Grant Stratton, Lucy, and I won't even insult you by trying to pronounce your last name, and Gemma. How are you doing this evening?
Good. Thank you. How are you?
You're good. I'm not so bad, buddy. Not so bad. We will get into our initial introductions first of all. So we will start with our regular panel. So, Broya, how are you doing today, buddy?
It's been a while. I'm really glad to be back. I've been really busy with moving, so I'm right now in my new house, and I'm hoping the connection will last good. So it's the first time really streaming up here. But yeah, really doing well. 2 weeks in this house now. Got this bad boy right here. So it's been a fantastic week already. Can't wait to get and ask some questions here, since I've got a son who's been a big fan of Battletoads. So yeah, thrilled to be here.
Awesome.
Nice.
And Patchy, how are you doing today, brother? What you been up to?
Well, I'm doing pretty good today. As you guys know, I had my bike delivered last Monday, and I sold it today. So, couldn't be any happier. So the Series X is very close to me now. So I cannot wait to actually get my hands on it. And man. So yeah, let's hope some stores. I'm not sure when it's coming, but let's hope some stores here in the Netherlands have a Series X. So yeah.
Sweet. And finally, Forza Erwin, how are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good, thank you. Good to be back. Last week I had to skip because I had some homework for my skills training. But today I'm up and running. I just played some PUBG before the show. I had a fantastic week actually playing on the Series X. It was a very nice experience overall. And looking forward to the show. Good to be back again.
Yeah, welcome back. It's good to have two years that wandering off and doing what you need to do and eventually coming back. But thank you.
Of course, mate. I will come back.
And again, we are on now to our special guests. So first of all, we will start with Lucy. How are you doing today, Lucy?
Yeah, good. Oh, I hate being going first. I guess it's fifth, so it's cool. Yeah, I'm good. Should I say a bit about myself and what I do, I guess? Yes,
don't mind, yeah. Introduce yourself and let me know what you do and your position at Dlala.
Yes, so I have been a games artist for a decade now, and I specialize in character design. I was the lead character designer on Battletoads, and I'm working with Dlala on the next project as well.
Awesome. And I hear you're now no longer just the character designer. You are also now the art director.
Yes. It's really exciting.
So congrats for that.
Thank you.
Congrats.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And next, AJ. How are you doing today, brother?
I'm doing good.
Introduce yourself.
I'm doing good. Thank you very much. So I'm AJ Grant Stratton. So I'm the CEO of Dlala, but my role on games is game director. So I've run Dlala for 8 years. Obviously, I was game director on Battletoads. I'm now game director on the new project, which is not going to be said right now. So,
if only exclusive. No, we'll let you off on that one. And finally, last but not least, Gemma, how are you doing today?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, not too bad. You always make me nervous when you do that, AJ. As much as I hope you're going to, just make a joke, you do make me nervous. I'm Gemma Foster. I'm the operations and production director at Dlala. Obviously, we're quite small, so we have multiple hats sometimes. So I kind of help AJ run the studio, make sure that we're not breaking any laws and so on. And obviously production director. So yes, I was production director on Battletoads, and I've been here for 5 years as of next week, I think it is actually.
Awesome.
Right.
And congratulations on that. I know the studio itself is 7 years old now, is that right?
8 years, so June 2012.
8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. I think I seen your throwback or something like that on your timeline where it was like, eventually we can announce Battletoads, and that was way back in 2018. So trying to calculate, that was wait a minute. What we're going on to here. So 8 years old now, 8 years, and it's been a good 8 years. I've had a kind of look into the history of Dlala as well, and all the different projects and studios and things you've worked on in the past. But of course, Battletoads being the most recent. I'm keen and interested to know kind of how that initial conversation went to try, and was it your idea to try and resurrect this franchise from its kind of limbo? How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, the original Battletoads and Battletoads Double Dragon are like two of my favorite games from when I was a kid. Obviously, with the original, I didn't get past level 3 until I had an emulator and a ROM about 10 years later. But yeah, so like I was pitching Battletoads concept to Rare from like 2012. Like I met Craig Duncan, who's the studio head at Rare, and I was sending him just awful Battletoads, and I mean awful Battletoads pitches. Like I think the last one I sent him before the good one was in 2013, and it was like a 3D episodic game where the Battletoads travelled through time and had to undo crimes that they'd accidentally caused, and honestly, it was terrible.
I mean, the concept sounds good though.
Somehow it helped.
Season 2 right there. Season 2's right there. No, but yeah, we started pitching this. When would it have been? So 2016, Gem? Would it have been 2016?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
We just had a project we're working on cancelled, and kind of part of the journey of that project, we've been working on our internal tool set. We showed a little demo of what we could do with that tool set to kind of Rare, and they got quite excited and said, look, if we're going to pitch a Battletoads, it seems like you guys are ready for it. So kind of we put together a concept then. Very much kind of a lot of what was in that concept is kind of what you saw as like the foundation of what came out in our Battletoads. And then, yeah, we were pitching it on and off for 2 years nearly. I think Christmas 2017, like it had got all the way up to Phil Spencer. Everyone had loved it, but like the funding structure didn't exist. Like because of the budget, like they had ID, which did kind of smaller titles, and then they had at the time Microsoft Game Studios, which is now Xbox Game Studios, and that was like your 40, 50, 100 million project. And as much as I would have loved to take 100
That's
million, they didn't want to give me 100 million. So it was kind of like, hey, look, the idea is great, but like the structure doesn't exist. And at that point it was done. Like we were sure it was done, and we kind of carried on, and we'd helped launch Sea of Thieves that year as well. And kind of, like basically the studio struggled. We're probably only 6 months away from bankruptcy really, or 6 months away from layoffs at least. And then May 2018, got an email from Craig Duncan just being like, hey, just about to touch down in Seattle. If conversation comes up about Battletoads again, would you guys be interested? And I was like, oh yeah, of course, we'd love to. Thinking nothing of it, like, people talk all the time. And then about 24 hours later, I was sat at my desk and email notification popped up, and it was him, and it said, hey AJ, about to go into meetings for 10 hours, so I won't be reachable, but we are go. And that's all it said. And he wasn't reachable. And I sat at my desk, and
what does this mean?
Now, I know that we are go meant we're making Battletoads. But I just sat there and I went, what does it mean? And I was just nearly in tears at my desk, and Gemma walked over and she was like, what's going on? And I said, look. And she went, what does we are go mean? And I was like, I don't know what we're and we just sat there, and we had to wait literally 10 hours for him to get out of a meeting. And I eventually got hold of him on phone. I was like, and he's like, you all right? And I was like, yeah, are you? And he goes, yeah. He's like, it's good, ain't it? I was like, what, Craig? What's good? And he's like, my email. I was like, what does it mean? He goes, what do you think it means? We're making Battletoads. I was like, how does that mean we're making Battletoads? So yeah, like we did that first teaser at June 2018, and like everybody on the net was like, oh my God, Battletoads is back. Why didn't they show any gameplay? And I think I signed the contract the day we got on the plane. So like the game didn't exist then. All that we had was this trailer we made. But yeah, so like we pitched for 2 years. We thought it had gone away, and then it literally came back out of nowhere and took us on the next 2 years of our lives, basically.
Yeah, and how did you the project itself? I mean, that was quite a quick turnaround as well. Like you mentioned, it was about 2 years, and obviously that in itself is quite a no small feat. It is, especially for obviously you've got character design, all the artwork for the entire game itself, and it's because it's multi-genre as well. It's a bit different because it's not just like just a platformer all the way through. There's quite a few different things, as we've kind of seen. But then you've also got the music that has to go with it. Then you have to do the voiceovers and getting the voice actors on board, and quickly, I would imagine, to start doing all that. And then, of course, the scripting. So how much of a real stress, I would imagine, across the board, not only from an operations point of view, from an art point of view, but just across the board, how much of a stress was that to try and get that game ready and out? Because I know obviously we played it, the vast majority of us were at X.018 as well and played it there. Yep. So how much of a stress was it really to get the game ready and out in that time frame?
I don't think I should answer this one. I'll let Gemma answer this, and then Lucy could also probably give you a.
It was an absolute piece of cake. I mean, I don't think, AJ was considerably less grey for sure. And I was too, but you probably can't see that. But yeah, it was a challenge. And obviously we had some really clear cut ideas about what we wanted and what we wanted to include, etc. But like you say, having so many game modes and trying to fully test and make them feel like what they need to feel like as a whole game, and not just sort of a fragmented kind of bunch of things stuck together, was probably one of the biggest challenges with it, to be honest. And obviously, it's not like you say these are the things we're going to do. We actually made, I don't know, I can't even tell you how many other types of gameplay we explored. I mean, there was a lot, and they were definitely in the game, and then they weren't in the game. So it was really, I mean, how many did we throw away? I sort of deleted that from my head, I think. But yeah, so that was obviously the big challenge. And the problem was in those timescales, it's like you said, you're trying to get other people to play it that are outside of Dlala in those timeframes as well, and kind of like user test and iterate and, and then try and do that on a big picture scale as well. And that's really quite difficult. Yeah, so there was a lot of times that we thought we were done with something, and it turns out we were not. And those are probably my worst days, where you probably saw a bit of a breakdown. Those discussions between me and AJ were not necessarily our most light-hearted, should we say.
She just described the whole development process with about 400 less swear words than she normally does.
That sounds about right. Obviously, I know there was kind of after initial play testing and things, I know there was a lot of feedback from yourselves initially over the kind of the way the game feels. And initially it felt a little bit slow. Of course, right now it feels awesome, and it's quick and hectic and hard at times, especially some of the enemies. But initially that it didn't feel as kind of, it felt a little bit sluggish when that kind of initial feedback came around, because I know you did take it on board. How did that feel to get that kind of feedback straight away?
Yeah, I mean, look, you don't have to tiptoe around this stuff. You can tell us if you thought it was crap beforehand. You've already said you love it now, so you can say whatever you want about what happened. Honestly, like, have you seen the zero punctuation review? There's nothing you can say that's going to upset us more than that. Yeah, look, I think the common misconception was that we, specifically me, like, ignored a lot of fan feedback early on. With the speed thing, it was really interesting. So that build you guys played at X.019, that was the same build at Gamescom in August. That was the same build at E3 in June. The only difference was, you guys might remember that joke I think Rash made at the beginning, where he's like, "Oh, it must be a conference thing, or must be an X.019 thing." Like, we changed that joke for every show, and that was it. And that build was like 3 months into production. So like, we took that build and we said to Rare and Microsoft, "There's like 20 of us. We can't keep doing conference builds. We're not able to do what you guys do, where you pull people off and just make these builds. So this build here, this is it. This is all you're going to get this year." So what everyone saw was literally like a 3-month snapshot of where we were into production. The speed thing's really interesting. So the internet's approach to feedback tends to be, you're awful, I hate you, you've ruined my childhood, I want you to die, what happened to the Dark Queen's outfit? And most of that, you know, we just go, which I just ignore. Like, fine, look, you know, you want to be an arse, I'll move on. And I was reading the comments, and somebody put up 10 minutes of Gamescom footage, the YouTube video, 10 minutes of Gamescom footage. And I was reading through the comments, like I tell the team not to do. And there was this one guy, and he was like, you know, if you put this video on 1.25 times speed, it doesn't actually look that bad. And I sat there and I went, oh, if you put the video on 1.2, and I did it, and I was like, oh, wow, yeah, he's right. And so I went into the game, and I quickly changed all the speeds. And I was like, hey, play this. And they were like, yeah, that feels better. What did you do? And I was like, oh, it's just an idea I had. But like, yeah, look, you know, the game was really slow. Like, and it's not that we didn't notice, it felt like it should have been like that. Like, you know, we did it to be a bit heavier, a bit kind of landing the hits, but it felt very sluggish. And suddenly, like, you know, what we didn't want everyone thinking, oh, they just wanted to make it look pretty and let the animation drive, because it wasn't. Like, all the combat timings were driven by design. So after we sped up the speed, we went in, we then cut some frames out of the hits, and we started trying to make it a little bit more punchy. And my worry was always I wanted the three Toads to feel different. So it's finding a way that we could condense all of them without making it feel like there was no difference. Like, we wanted Pimple to feel slower and heavier than Zitz, who was so super quick. And I'd always push back against making those changes, because I was really worried that line would just get blurred and it would just be reskins. But in the end, like, you know, we cut the frames out, we still kept that consistency. We'd been putting off this conversation about having run. Like, the thing that upset us the most from the conferences was how crap the game looked when everyone just spammed dash to get through the level like that. And we were like, yeah, but that's not their fault. They're basically saying we're using the fastest tool you gave us. And kind of, because I'd put off this decision for so long, it became kind of, you know, 6 months ago, I could have just gone, hey, let's put run in the game when you're not in combat. But at this point, it had to be, okay, I don't want Gemma to know that I want run to go in. So I need to canvas every department, find out how long it's going to take, and see if I can sneak it in before I fully tell her. So
Gemma's face, though, during all this, just Gemma's face.
And I went round to Eric, animation director, and I was like, if I want to put run in the game, would it take very long? He's like, no, I could do that quite quick. I was like, okay. And I went up to Ben, the tech director, and I was like, hypothetically, if we were to do this, and he was like, oh, I'm not sure on that. And then he got back to me about an hour later, and he's like, yeah, we've got a rough version of it in. And then I went to Gemma, and I was like, hey, Gem, I think we should put run in the game. I think it will roughly take about this much time. And obviously, she knows straight away that I've already spoke to everyone.
Why was there a rough version of run already in Age?
Well, who knows?
Why? Is it because it had been discussed on many occasions before, maybe, about... Is it?
Supposedly, I changed my mind.
Isn't it also dangerous when you release such an early version of a game? Because as you can see, also first impressions are make or break, especially in these times of social media and etc. Is it maybe also a learning that you don't want to release such an early build for the next game you're working on, what you cannot mention?
I mean, when we released Battletoads Season 4, no. Yeah.
Banjo-Kazooie? Did you say Banjo-Kazooie?
Banjo 3 confirmed. Yeah, look, it's hard, right? Like, you have to do the conference things, like, you know, because the problem is it's you're screwed if you do and you're screwed if you don't. We said nothing from June 2018 to June 2019. There was nothing, and everyone just goes, "Oh, nothing's being spoken about. I wonder if this has been cancelled." And then we show the build, we get some feedback. We know, like, look, you know, it is what it is. We know how we're going to make this. We know how it's going to be. And really, in a dream world, we would have done another build. We would have had the time and the money to be able to go, okay, you know what? We're going to do E3 in June 2019 with this build, and then X.019 in December or November. Let's do an updated build. But we didn't have that, right? And if we'd done nothing, if we'd said nothing from June 2018 to June, 2020, then we probably would have just been forgotten about. And, like, we probably would have been reasonably well received based on the fact we're on Games Pass, but would we have hit 1 million in 6 weeks? I'm not convinced we would. Like, even though the narrative around the game was 70% negative from like June 2019 to like April 2020, like we were still spoke about, you know. There were still people saying, oh, I can't believe that new Battletoads must have been cancelled. We all hated the art, it must have been cancelled. It was too slow. But people spoke about it and people wanted to know. And then when that trailer came out in April 2020, I think it was announcing release, or might have been July actually, it was July, weren't it, about a month before launch. Everyone was suddenly like, oh my God, like it actually looks good. Like they took our feedback into account. No, it looks exactly the same it did in that trailer you hated, but sure. Like, but so like, you know, if we'd done nothing, then people would have we would have probably just disappeared into obscurity, and it would have looked like that they announced this game in 2018 and we'd become vaporware. I have zero regrets, honestly. Like, even for all the sleepless nights and reading all the horrible tweets and stuff, like zero regrets with the way we did it. The only thing I would have liked is if we've been able to talk to people more. Like,
yes, is it that you maybe share more that it's really early build, because then I think people will understand better as well, right? That you're really early in development, that there are lots of improvement needs to be made. Did you tell that back then or no? Or did you just have the gameplay running and did it say it was a very early build?
I mean, look, we're like...
Or are you strict in that also?
When somebody's paying you a big check, they get to say exactly what you talk about, right? And so we would go and we would say, hey, people are asking questions. Wouldn't it be great if we could talk about this stuff? And the response would be, hey, that, you know, there's a way we approach this. There's a right way to approach this marketing. That's not how we do it. And at that point, you know, our contracts, I mean, God knows how many times I was naughty. Like, we're not even really meant to talk about a lot of the games we're working on while we're working on them, right?
Yeah.
And I'd still post up on Twitter where I'd be like, hey, just did this thing. This was really awesome. But yeah.
Is that what we're working on next is...
And is that the marketing department of Xbox is making such, let's say, NDAs or something like that? Or how does that work?
Look at Gemma's face. She's really worried I'm going to say something I shouldn't.
Shut up.
It's not just Microsoft. It's every big company, right? Like, when you're an indie, like a small studio, it's all about just talking about what you're doing all the time. This is what I'm doing. This is how I'm doing it. And like, you build up that momentum. With the big companies, they're more used to, hey, like, let's show something once a year. When it comes out, we'll just throw some money at marketing, and that works. And the problem we had is, like, we were neither of those things. We were a small independent studio with a small title being published by a major publisher. So they didn't really know how to handle us. So what they do is they work how they know how to work. And that is, look, we talk on certain beats. We don't talk in between it. When the game comes out, we'll put some information out there about it. And, you know, when it then came to us being finished, it was an interesting situation where they had this type of game they hadn't actually done before. Like, you know, they hadn't released a game like this. And so I think part of it was they probably didn't know how to talk about it. So we'd spent 2 years not saying anything. And then when it was time to talk about it, they didn't really have a template structure they could use. Because you can't market our game like Halo. You can't market it even like Ori, right? Like, it's a very, very different title. So, like, I don't blame any of them. Like, I don't think any of them did the wrong thing. I think it's more because there wasn't a foundation for what the right way to do our game was and how to market it. And look, the argument can be made that whilst I didn't agree with it, I could never have imagined 1 million people would play the game in 6 weeks. I just couldn't. Like, I set 1 million as our year one. Like, it was a year one to a lifetime goal for me was, if 1 million people play this before I'm dead,
fantastic.
I'm happy, right?
Yeah.
So as much as I may not have agreed with the approach to marketing, I can't deny the results.
No, okay.
Yeah, and as developers, we kind of tried to capitalize on the opportunity for the builds being at the conferences. I mean, we watched very eagle-eyed, didn't we, as people played them? Because like we said, we weren't getting that opportunity. We knew in the time frames we didn't have great opportunity to do a lot of user testing and so on outside of the people that are making it, which is always, you know, dangerous if you're making it and testing it. So we just tried to say, look, we're doing this. let's go for it, and let's be present there, and let's watch what people are doing and listen to what people were saying, and kind of take something from it that's hopefully going to help us make something better.
No, it's exactly what it's there for. And to be fair, there was especially at conferences like XO, etc., when you've got indie titles kind of spanned across kind of the outskirts of the conference center. Those are all Grounded was one of them as well. Another early in development game. You had Minecraft Dungeons was sitting there. Granted, that's a massive IP in itself anyway, Minecraft, but that crashed more than anything I know at that conference. Everybody was crashing on that thing, but I didn't deter anybody.
but there are a couple of games like Minecraft and like Battletoads as well. I played them at X.018. When I play them, I know instantly this is the game that I'm going to be playing at home with my kids.
Yeah,
I really loved it. I really loved it right there. With my friend, we've played a couple of sessions over there at the X.019, and when we came back at home, we were coming back from London. Yeah, those were the games that we were talking about. Yeah, I loved it, really.
That's awesome.
I wanted to ask Lucy a question. Lucy, in terms of the art development, should we say, or the full, when AJ has given you this grandiose idea of what he wants in his in this game, this remake, this reboot of the title, especially the amount of different characters you had to design across the board. Not only the lead characters, of course, giving them a fresh look, but also then all of the different enemies, and there is a vast amount of enemies, and then you've got multi-scale kind of levels. You've got like even though it's a 2D level, it kind of goes back into the distance and using ropes and things like that. The actual art design across the board, how difficult was that for you to imagine how many different characters you had to design and different enemies you had to design? Was that kind of difficult in itself?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because I joined a bit later on in the process, and the main characters were designed. But I think other than that, it was maybe a couple of enemies. And yeah, I didn't realize like most of everybody else would be my design, which was really fun. At the beginning, it was a bit hard when someone's like, okay, yeah, but we want something really stupid, like to get your mindset in that kind of, well, get in the mindset of like just thinking like not something you would usually think about, or like not stuff you usually draw or design in characters.
Yeah.
But on the opposite hand, it was just really fun because AJ was just giving me these super vague briefs, and I would just go and do what I thought would be best or fun. So yeah, that was really good because I had an idea of what the level was, and AJ was giving me this weird briefs. It's like, oh yeah, but like this, it's like this thing lives there, but it's also really stupid. Or I can't. I have my list somewhere, my list of AJ's briefs. But yeah, no, it was great, and I think just getting to design some of the big characters because we did a lot of like the enemies, but it was nice to do like the main baddies. That was really good.
Yeah. I mean, for some of them, for instance, you've got like a guy that's standing behind an ice cream parlor with a giant trumpet. Like, was that one of yours?
That was not. That was not.
That level had so Brucey in that level, which is the big orange dog-like thing. Lucy drew that on the first day of her art test for the project. So Lucy did like this. We always do like a paid art test to make sure that, you know, one, that people can kind of get the style, but two, that people can work with my briefs because they're so awesome. Is what Lucy was trying.
Exactly. And detailed and just to the point.
So specific. But yeah, Lucy drew Brucey kind of like in her art test on her first day, basically, and he ended up going in game, which was brilliant. Cool. A sign of things to come, basically.
Yeah. Oh, definitely a sign of things to come. So a lot of the characters are, like I say, are weird and wonderful to say the least. But
Thank
that
you.
makes
That's exactly what we're going for.
part of the charm of the game, though. It's part of the charm. I don't think it would be Battletoads if it wasn't so wild and vivid and colourful. Very neon look to the game as well. Was that something that you were kind of initially going for there, AJ? Or
Yeah, so I knew I wanted bright. Like for me, when I think of Battletoads, like it always felt like a cartoon, and like it was limited in how it looked by what was available at the time, technology-wise. You know, I know a lot of people go to Battletoads Arcade, which was more gritty and kind of, you know, like metal cover influenced. But like for me, it was always about that Tex Avery kind of bright cartoon influence. And when I was looking at when we were doing this, I was like, well, Battletoads 91 was very early Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers. Like the stuff I grew up loving was Earthworm Jim and Cartoon Network stuff and RV Monsters. And they were our reference points. You know, when we were looking to do this, my reference points for, you know, visuals were that. Like, I want people to feel how I felt watching cartoons when I was a kid when they play our game. And then really, like, you know, the real credit for the environment goes to Rory and Yonjay, our two environment artists. Like, you know, we had awesome contractors come in and help as well for the environment stuff, but Rory and Yonjay really made that style theirs. And so kind of a lot of that comes down to the colours as well. And when Lucy came on board, she then started helping us out with stuff like colour scripting. But yeah, it was really like we're trying to capture like what would those cartoons we loved in the 90s look like now. And then obviously Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Rise of the TMNT trailer come out while we were making the game, and I was like, great, everyone's going to think we've just ripped off this now. Which feels like the circle of life, considering, you know, Battletoads in 91 was just a Turtles ripoff. But yeah, no, I love the visuals, and as good as the game looked in my head, like what everyone did is 100 times better than I could have ever pictured. So I'd love to take credit for this, but like this was all them. This was all our amazing art team that did this.
I've got to say, though, you mentioned before the kind of feel of each different character, and obviously you managed to achieve that. And personally, myself, I always go between the ultra fast Zit and then obviously the muscle bound.
Yep.
You have to have that good in between. You got one very quick, and then the other one that's just all power. But then you have the special. Again, you didn't, thankfully. Obviously, you did manage to get the right thing in between speeding the game up, but also then having these special attacks that they do that feel kind of like they've got a bit of punch behind them. So to me, that was another good thing. I love seeing. I mean, I've always tried to figure out how to do some of the special moves you've got, because there are quite a few for each one, and I haven't quite figured them all out yet. How did you come up with some of these weird and wonderful special moves that each character have?
So a lot of the morph stuff. Credit for that goes to Roberto. So Roberto, by the time we finished the project, and now he's like our guy in charge of VFX. But at the start of the project, he was really my concept artist and storyboard artist for combat. So he really helped me to shape what combat was by kind of doing me like animated storyboards. But one of the exercises we did was like, okay, let's explore some morph ideas. And he come up with loads and loads of the basic morphs. And then our animation director, Eric. So Eric's amazing. He's been in the industry nearly 30 years. Like his first job was cleaning up the line work on Earthworm Jim. So like this is in his blood. Eric has this great tendency. He's super cool, super chilled. And he'll just say stuff like, he'll just be sitting there and be like, wouldn't it be great if Pimple just turned into a giant train? And like just out of nowhere. And then he'll be like, yeah, that'd be great. And then he'll just make Pimple turn into a giant train. Or like he'll be like, yeah, wouldn't it be great if like Rash just had this really, really gross foot, and instead of doing the big boot, it was if that foot had just been released from the boot for the first time in 30 years. So we had this great play where like all the morphs, all the big attacks were like, some ideas came from me, some came from design, some came from the art team, and some were literally Eric just being like, man, I'd really like to animate the Toads doing this. So kind of it's this really playful kind of collaborative experience where like everyone kind of got to have an input. But I love them. Like the special attacks, like the sarcophagus drop and Rash's arcade cabinet and Zitzy's ball, like they nearly weren't in the game. They went in the game. I mean, just to give Gemma another pain expression, I mean, I'm pretty sure they went in, we're talking weeks before we submitted. Because when you guys played the build at XO, there used to be a special system, so you could build up your special bar and then do a special move. And it just didn't work.
Streets of Rage.
Yeah, more similar to that, right? And Pimple's Sarcophagus Drop was one of them, and Rash is Arcade Cabinet. But the system just didn't work, so I'd already taken it out by the time people saw it at Gamescom. And then I was just sat here with these amazing animations, and I was like, oh, they're so cool. And I was like, well, what happens if we just put them in let's just put them in as a normal attack, but you have to do a longer combo. And so we cut up the Sarcophagus Drop, and we put that in, and we cut up the Arcade Cabinet and put that in. And I really hated Zitz's one. Zitz had this robot head that fired lasers, and I just didn't like it. And at that point, it once again became another awkward conversation to have with Gemma, because I was sneaking this stuff in because I didn't need anyone else. And then suddenly I needed a whole new animation. So once again, it became hey, just had this idea. Definitely haven't been working on it for the last 2 days. But I'm going to need an animation of Zitz riding a laser ball. So that system literally went that went in. We tested it, we got it balanced, and then the game was sent off for certification probably less than a month after that.
But so, again, it's the whole time scale of getting it from A to Z, and obviously Gemma must have been doing her head in every time you come in with a new thing. All right, what you done now? What have you included now? I know you've already included it, so you may as well tell us.
Oh, if only the conversation was that polite.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. I think Broya has a few questions anyway lined up from his son, so I'm going to let Broya take the stage here.
Yeah, but I'm looking at the screen right now. I'm seeing all those animations, especially those specials. I've been having so much fun with my kid, especially. We were playing with 2 of us. We were just doing breakdance and the train. Who come up with those ideas? The train and the breakdance. It was amazing. Just those 2.
So the breakdance was Eric, definitely. We knew with Rash we wanted the taunt to be something stupid.
Yep.
And Eric was a big fan of breakdancing back when he was younger, and he was just like, "Hey, can I just make Rash do a breakdancing move?" And then the next thing I know, he'd done this really quick pencil test version of that, and it was awesome. And I think did we have the cap went in the end, didn't it? The cap spinning on his head. So that came from Lucy. Was that one of your avatar designs initially that you put? Did you do the taunt avatar for when he's taunting? It was, wasn't it?
Yeah. Pimple? I did those, yeah.
So in Lucy's taunt avatar, Rash was screaming and he had a cap on. And then Eric saw the cap in that, and then he was like, if we get time at the end, can I put the cap on the taunt? Which he did. And then the train, I think the train was initially Roberto, and then our animator India was the one who kind of took it from a train idea would be cool all the way through to the awesome animation you see here. In India, by the way, so all the Pimples animations and a lot more was India, and India had never worked on a game before she did this. So India literally graduated. She joined us 2 weeks after graduating, and then her first game credit is on Battletoads, where she animated all of one of the main characters, and she just knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, that's really impressive what you've done there. It's especially the amount of variations which are in there. It's awesome to see. Does it have a sequel? A Game Pass obviously did very well for you. You are working on a new project here, but are there some DLC plans for the future?
Look, all I can tell you, there's no official plans for anything right now. What I will say is we loved working on this, and whilst it's nice for us to have a little break and do something different, there's still more stories we've got to tell in this universe. So, if my phone rings and it's Craig Duncan or it's Microsoft and they want to talk about doing a second one, we would love to have the conversation. And that makes it sound like we've broken up with them. We still talk to them every day, but
why?
Right now.
Why do you talk to them every day?
Because we're friends.
Yeah, sure.
We finished the game and still like each other. We've got to hang on to that. That doesn't happen very often.
Craig is cool, I know.
but yeah, like, look, I love making this game, and I think we all did. Besides how burnt out we were towards the end, like, we'd all love to go back and play with this universe more. And me and Tom, the lead writer, we've already got like notes we made as we were writing this for what the second season would look like. So there's a lot of stuff we'd love to do. But it's. These games do awesome, and it did awesome in Game Pass, and I guess it will depend, like, when we finish doing what we're doing, is like, are they looking for Game Pass titles of this size still? It's hard for us to compete with, the massive Xbox titles that launch straight into Game Pass. But yeah, look, I would love to tell you we're working on it. We're not. I can promise you we're not working on it right now, but I can also promise you that if the opportunity arose, we would seriously consider it to do some more stuff.
Awesome. And how is Xbox helping you? I see you're a small studio. You are developing. You've been developing for Battletoads and for the new game as well. The new technologies that Xbox is providing, for example, xCloud, is that helping you with the development as well?
xCloud's super interesting, right? So we were one of the launch titles on xCloud. What did it launch as? It was like cloud gaming, wasn't it? And we were one of the launch titles. And we found out we were one of the launch titles in the press release that went out the night before. The great thing with the game, right, is that, like, we built it for Xbox One X, and it runs 60 frames per second, 4K. It runs great on xCloud, and it runs great on Xbox Series X, right? And great thing for Microsoft is they only had to pay us for one game, and they got it working on all of them. And the great thing for us is, like, those platforms now have opened up a new audience. So, like, we didn't necessarily have to think about that while we were making it. All we had to do was make sure that, it ran on Steam, and it ran on Xbox One X and Xbox One S and Xbox One. So, like, we didn't necessarily think about it, and we didn't even see it. Like, I don't know. I think I've seen the title sequence on cloud gaming on xCloud, and I saw someone did a quick resume video for Xbox Series X, and that's all I've seen on any platform that isn't the ones we launched on. So it didn't necessarily affect how we made it, but it's really awesome, right? That going into the next generation of games and being able to play it on your phone, like, people can carry on playing this game. Because, we came out literally 2 months before the new generation, so it would have been devastating if they couldn't. So yeah, it didn't affect development, but it's really cool that it works.
Awesome, nice.
No, I'm just looking at, and I forgot about some of these MIDI games. But who come out with "Let's Massage an Alien"?
Gemma, I think Gemma.
Yeah, that was definitely one of the ones. When I heard it, I was like, "What?" Sorry? Pimple, and it was like, and we'll have pan pipes in the background, and and it was like, and interestingly, it was one of those things that we sort of tried, and straight off the bat, anybody outside of Dlala, obviously predominantly Rare, that played this was like one of my favorite parts. Like, it very quickly became, something that people really, really loved. But yeah, I don't actually know it. Who was the idea holder for Masseuse Pimple?
AJ again?
The journey this one took was that when Tom and I were writing the overview, we were like, they have to get normal jobs. Like, when they get out of the bunker, they have to get normal jobs. And we were like, well, like, why don't we just make the player play their normal jobs? Like, so we had the name Menial Jobs. We had this name before any gameplay existed. We knew it was going to be menial jobs, and they had to be really basic jobs. And then, like, we had a bunch of ideas for jobs, and then I take that to Grant, our lead designer, and I'm like, hey, we need them to have normal jobs. Like, it'd be great if they were stupid or whatever. And then he works with, like, Liam and Karem, our UI guys, and the next thing we know, we've got Pimple wearing some guy called Ron's overalls, massaging an alien that's groaning. Ironically, so I'll tell this story now. One of the only things we had to tone down before we sent it off was the style of groans that alien made. So one of the only bits of direction we had from Rare where they were like, you need to change this, was, groans are a little bit weird.
That's coming from Ray.
Yeah. I mean, it's Rare's fault we're like how we were. We grew up on their games, so they've got no one else to blame. So I think it came from kind of, we needed them to have basic jobs, and then Grant and Liam and Karem kind of turned that into what you see in there now, and hardly had any direction. Like they kind of just really ran with it and turned some really stupid things like working in an office into quite a fun little mini game that can be quite brutal on the hardest difficulty.
Oh, 100%.
I'm wondering, how did Rare support you as the studio? Did they really leave you alone and you only sent some builds, or did they also send you some technical help on specific stuff or something like that? How was the support from their side on this project?
Jem, do you want to talk to this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they always, thankfully as well, were very kind in terms of making sure that, you know, people knew that it was our baby. So creatively, you know, we drove everything that's in the game. And the way that worked is, you know, we just had to have collaboration along the way. So we had Paul Collins at Rare, who was partnered up with us to kind of, you know, look at all the different game modes, give feedback on them, work closely with us to sort of see whether basically they had anything that kind of jumped out. Obviously, as well, they needed to look at it from through a Microsoft lens. Obviously, since the original Battletoads, the way they have to approach like what's in there and how characters are perceived potentially, etc., has changed somewhat. So they also provided that, obviously, with regards to make the groans less groany, etc. But from a technical perspective, from a design perspective, to be honest, it was, you know, it was Dlala. I think that, you know, they really sort of managed more the marketing side of everything. And it was definitely experience. They did give us a lot of help, as much as we could have in the timeframes, etc., with regards to the user testing. We had some very targeted sessions around that. I mean, what you're seeing now on the screen, obviously the hover bike in particular, that was something that was iterated on a fair amount. And that's from a design perspective, but also I know the tech team had a few headaches with this one as well, like getting this perspective, but you know, the game being in 2D and making sure that everything felt right. I think every team felt the pain of that one, like every department felt the pain of the perspective and the 2D, etc. But yeah, something like this, you know, there was a lot of user testing on this, and I think one of the comments Grant made the other day, the lead designer on it, he said he'd really, really love at some point to like release what we considered the first completed level, because it was one of those things where, again, it's, you know, it's yes, we're designing it so we play it, but it was like, yep, it's too hard, it's too hard. And obviously we wanted to keep an element of that old, you know, the feeling of it that people felt in terms of it having that reputation, but it was like, no, it's too hard, and we got to the point where everybody in the studio was like, no, this is right, and then it went to Rare and it was like, no, it's too hard. And it was, you know, it was a bit like that for quite some time, wasn't it, Age? But I think that was probably, to be, you know, that was probably the most valuable support that we had, really, was that kind of insight.
Yeah.
I mean, judging by, I was good. I'll let you go first, Erwin. Go on.
Yeah, so I saw also some in CFTs. I saw also the sales with the Battletoad sales, right? Are there some things more coming in CFTs in the future? Maybe the characters in the game or something like that? Or yeah, you probably cannot share all of that.
Honestly, you'll probably know when we do. You know, like,
just drop it on you.
there was an awesome new Christmas jumper released today, and I found out via the tweet. Like, you know, look.
I didn't know.
There you go. Christmas jumper came out today with our characters on it. Look, you know, Rare own this. Rare own Battletoads. You know, we didn't even license it, right? They paid for us to make this game. So we knew the sales were coming for Sea of Thieves, which was awesome. You know, we'd been a part of that journey. We worked on it for 6 months, like the game, like Sea of Thieves back in the day. A lot of us were, you know, alpha players, so that was really cool to see. Same. Although I think I forgot to claim mine. I'm hoping I still can. So like that was wicked. But what I like to think is that like Battletoads, I'm not saying we've made this blockbuster hit. What I hope at least is we made it a little bit more relevant again. So maybe when they're looking at like, hey, IP, should we do something with? Like maybe we'll see more Battletoads stuff coming through. You know, maybe you'll be walking around in Everwild and there'll be a random frog that looks like Bash, or who knows.
Yeah. It's in Killer Instinct again though as well. It didn't take them too long to put it in Killer Instinct. I mean, was that just before you made this game though?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Killer Instinct actually came out about 2013, I think. The rash was probably about 2013, 2014. So yeah, like we've actually got the big rash from Rare Replay, which is what that rash is based on. He's downstairs in our lobby, like a giant one of him. But yeah, like, so it'd be great to see more Battletoads stuff coming through, as long as it's not another game, unless it's made by us. I don't want to see that. I don't want to see a tweet saying Battletoads Season 2 coming out in 2 weeks.
You're like, oh, thanks for springing that on me.
Then we need to have some words with Greg.
Was it a case of as well that Ray kind of helped with a lot of the kind of original assets and things like that to kind of get to grips with some of the things that you were kind of working with, or was everything brand new?
Everything's brand new. So the only stuff in here which has got any tie to the old stuff is Dave Housden, our composer. He chose to take a couple of David Wise's old tracks and do modern versions of them.
Yeah.
But besides that, everything, including those tracks, really, everything was started completely from the ground up. I was very keen for us to, respect what had come before, but not rely on it. So I wanted this to be our game. Like, this is our Battletoads, what our Battletoads feels and looks like. So there was we didn't have any assets from the old ones at all. We've got those tracks from Dave, and then the logo is very much influenced by the old kind of games as well.
And I mean, in terms of the titles you've helped work on before, we'll just kind of go and have a little bit more of a history of Dlala as a company. Of course, we know you've worked on Sea of Thieves, helped Ray with Sea of Thieves, but also Battletoads. But what other games have you kind of collaboratively worked on in the past that you're kind of proud to kind of put your stamp on as well?
So we're going back a bit now. We're preceding not only Lucy working with us, but we're preceding Gemma. So when we first started, in around 2014, we just left Microsoft where we'd been incubated, and we were doing our own stuff, but we started taking on some contract work from Team 17. So we helped get the Escapists onto Xbox, and then we also did some DLC for that. We did a bit of DLC called what was it? It was based on the A-Team, but I can't remember what it was called now. But that was really fun because, for one thing, when we worked on the Escapists, Craig, the guy I started the company with, he was a backer on Kickstarter for the Escapists before it got picked up. So we both got to work on this game he'd backed, and then we got to make this bit of DLC based on the A-Team for a game he'd backed. So it was really fun doing that, and Team 17 had just got into the publishing stuff at that point. Like, we were the second game they signed. So, and Escapist was the first. And we made minus 90 grand and the Escapist made millions. But like, it was really cool to kind of be a part of that early on. Helped on the Escapists. We helped on a game called Schrodinger's Cat. And then we've also done some proper diverse stuff. So we did a load of work with the Institute for Creative Technologies, and we made like training games for the US government. So like, we're talking like, I had to go over to Germany and be in a room with like the FBI, and oh hey, here's like a 4-star general, and I always got suited and booted, but I always got suited, but my rule is always like, I don't wear a suit for work. So if I'm wearing a suit, I'm going to wear my skate shoes. So like, I turned up and I met this general and shook his hand, and he just stood there and he just looked at these beaten up DCs on my feet, and the look of disgust on his face.
Drop and give me 20.
So that was really cool. So we've had like some quite varied projects. But Battletoads is the epitome, right? Like, this was a bucket list game. When we signed with our agent in 2014, this was on the list of games. I said, one day I want to make a sequel to Battletoads. But when you say that stuff, you don't imagine it's ever going to happen, let alone you don't imagine someone's going to give you the keys to the kingdom and let you do what you want, including putting the main character in a diaper. So like, we've worked on some really cool stuff, but like, for me, like, Battletoads was kind of the start of a fresh take for us. It was our chance to really show what we can do and who we are. I'm proud of our past, but I'm definitely more proud of the stuff we've kind of done now and moving forward.
Most definitely. I mean, obviously, you're going to take a lot from what you've learned in the development of Battletoads into your next project. And obviously, very keen to see what it is that you are doing on your next project. in terms of the puzzles that were implemented into the game, now a lot of them, and I spent a lot of time as well myself personally, stuck on quite a few of these puzzles, and it's a case of just thinking, what is going on this? Where am I putting? What is going on? Spent about half an hour just looking at the screen, thinking I don't even know what I'm doing yet, and then figuring out that I need to use bubblegum. Who come up with these ideas for the puzzles, and how hard was it to design some of the puzzles that you put into the game?
So all the puzzles, I think were Grant. Well, it's definitely Grant, our lead designer, and his team. You know, for the in-world stuff at least, that was all him. Yeah, it was weird, right? Like we knew we didn't just want to do a straight up brawler, and we knew we needed something to break up the brawling experience a bit more. So kind of in those side scrolling levels, we knew we were going for like quite long. Like traditionally, like if you play this level that's on the screen at the moment, this level probably takes people 20 to 35 minutes. That's probably about a third of the total length of Streets of Rage 4, right? Like that's a good chunk of levels. So we knew if we were going for this sort of scale, we wanted to break up the fighting a little bit with both like puzzles and hidden collectibles. But yeah, you know, most of that at Grant's brainchild. Like most of this is kind of like from his twisted mind. And there was a lot more. There were a lot of different ones. We had 4 or 5 different types, and we just stripped them all back to kind of go for kind of like the 2 main ones. And I think the hacking games, which has got nothing to do with hacking, but we made it look like hacking. You know, that was, you know, Grant had a lot to do with that. And I think Johannes, our technical designer, did a lot of that. And then it really got pulled together by Liam, who was UI programmer and is now game designer, and Karem, our UI UX director. Like, as Jem said, because of the size of our team, like, so much of the stuff you're seeing in here, we can't really just point to one person and go, like, that was them. Like, it really was, like, everyone. And everyone played the game every day, and everyone gave feedback, and, like, everyone's feedback was valid. It was never like, well, it doesn't matter what you say, you're an artist, where this is about design. And it was never like, you're a tech guy, don't talk about art. You know, everyone kind of had their input. And I genuinely feel the game was as good as it was because it wasn't just each department doing their own thing. Even if sometimes we ended up in a process that felt a little bit like it was, like there was still that feedback coming through, which really let us kind of let everyone have their breathing room to kind of to get their input.
That's actually, I think, one of the cool things of having a smaller team is that you have multiple roles, and then you have more diversity in the things that you can do, and the feedback that you receive is, as you said, it's not, I'm the tech guy, so I only do the tech stuff. You can just say it, and you have a team that is listening, and all the feedback is welcome. So,
yeah,
a smaller team is actually sometimes also a benefit, especially if you have the right partners standing beside you.
100%. And there's people on the team that made Battletoads that weren't even alive when the last Battletoads game came out.
I can believe that.
They're literally like, you know what I mean? And so many of the team that made this game had never worked on a big commercial game before. You know, in fact, out of all the animators on the project, Eric was the only animator that had ever animated on a game before. Everyone else, we were training to be game animators. And like, you know, for a lot of our team, this was their first commercial product. And it has a lot of risks, and there's a lot of training to do with that in a short space of time. But also you get a completely kind of fresh perspective. Like, you know, I'm only 36, but that's pretty old right now in game terms. Like, you know, there's kids who are 3 years old. You know, I've seen my nieces and my nephews playing on tablets and phones, right? So having kind of this great spread where we've got like these nearly 30-year vets, and then we've got these people who have just come into games, I think that diversity of kind of age has really let us create something a little bit different to what would have come out of just, you know, me and Grant sitting in a room and designing a game.
Yeah. And I mean, like you say, though, obviously our age now, it's a bit different. Back then, we're very limited on what we could play on and how we could play. Of course, online play back then was very limited at best. If you had dial-up, you were kind of one of the chosen few. But now you have an abundance of places you can play games, and I think obviously there's a lot of people are spoiled for choice really on what they can do and how they can do it. And even in terms of designing games now, you've got an abundance of platforms you can design for. Whereas back then it was a case of it was either PC or one of the very limited consoles that were out back then. Now, like you see with games like Battletoads, they kind of span across which is on PC and Xbox. With Xbox have now, of course, branched out and put things on xCloud so you can play that on your mobile when you're going around. But then, of course, you've got an abundance of other consoles, and you've got obviously your games on Nintendo Switch, but there's mobile handheld consoles and there's mobile itself. So the design, the kind of audiences are vastly different as well to what they used to be, and I suppose that also helps. And when it comes to development, because you have a greater kind of feedback than you ever used to. I mean, of course, we all miss the old computer game magazines and things like that, and picking up demo discs that we no longer can do anymore. Did you ever think as well of when you were initially kind of floating the idea to have things like Kickstarters to help the studio along, or was that never something that kind of come to fruition or come to mind?
You know, over the course of the company's history, we've kind of looked at the different funding options. And the problem is like before Battletoads, we were half the size we are now. In fact, a little bit smaller. So and we were already doing multiple jobs. So even when we were looking at our own projects, Kickstarter's great, but all my friends that have done Kickstarter successfully have said it's a full-time job. And like, you know, our friends Mike and Ed, who did like the original character designs for the Toads, they did Armor Krog on Kickstarter. Got successful. Right. They made it, and then I met up with them in LA 2-3 years later. They were still doing the Kickstarter rewards, like, because it was like 2 of them making that game, and they like done like signed images. They were still making the backer rewards, and it's just a commitment we couldn't have. And then for every Kickstarter that raises 5 million, there is thousands of Kickstarters that can't even raise $200. And the problem we have is like, we're not an indie studio. We're not like 2 guys in the garage anymore who don't care about money. Like, we've got team members to pay, and like, if we're not bringing in income, then we can't have staff, we can't have offices. So we're very limited in the sense that like, we have to fund the game via publishers. Like, we haven't got enough money ourselves to self-fund. We can't take really the risk on a Kickstarter ever. So we're always in talks with publishers about, okay, well, look, these are the titles we could make for you, but we need the money. You know, and that's really how the company has existed for a long, long time. Like, even our own titles have been published and funded. So yeah, it's one of those things where I think, you know, things like Kickstarter are awesome, and I think they're awesome when you're small, when you can take the risk, and maybe like you can make your game for 20 grand because you just want to pay yourself 20 grand for a year and make it all yourself. Like, that's brilliant for that. But you know, we could go on Kickstarter and we could raise £1 million, and we wouldn't even get a full year of development time. Like, do you know what I mean? So like, it's just for us, like, who's going to pay us? Like, we're not going to raise even Double Fine money. You know, the Double Fine Kickstarter, we're not going to get paid that. We're not Double Fine. If Tim Schafer, the greatest game designer in history, can only raise that much money, no one's going to pay AJ Grant Scrutton that much money. So I think it's awesome for what it is and for what it can do for smaller companies. It's just, it doesn't fit. That model doesn't really fit Dlala, not today, and not really for the last kind of 6 years.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, to be honest. To be fair, I didn't realize that Tim Schafer had put a Kickstarter up.
The Double Fine pre being bought by Microsoft, he doesn't have to worry about money anymore. He's got Microsoft now. But yeah, the game that became Broken Age was the first ever game to break like 2 million, I think it was, on Kickstarter. Fantastic documentary on YouTube. I watch it like 50 times a year. Check it out if you get a chance.
Have you kept in? Obviously, speaking of working with Microsoft, though, obviously working very closely with Ray. Is that something that you'd be keen to do again in the future, working closely with potential future projects collaboratively with Ray, or working with them on whatever additional titles they might be working on, such as Sea of Thieves, etc.? Is that something that you're keen on doing again?
yeah, Jem can answer this one.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Obviously, we've made very good, long-lasting friends with people over at Rare. And, you know, like AJ said, he's not lying when he says we speak to them a lot at the moment. I mean, I only caught up with Paul Collins yesterday. And Paul Cunningham today, in actual fact. So, you know, they're like our two guys over there that we have most of the dealings with. And, you know, the funny thing is that with such in, you know, the grand scheme of games, such a short development cycle, it really did feel a little bit like, you know, those relationships became more cemented like nearer the end. And maybe, you know, you're getting into the flow of what this model looks like. Because that was the other side of it. Like AJ sort of touched on earlier, we were doing something from a publishing perspective on Microsoft's part, and then Rare kind of overseeing their IP, which ultimately is Microsoft's, but very much, you know, Rare. It was a model that hadn't really been done before. So we kind of had to work super close to like figure out what that looks like. And I think like the time scales, you know, towards the end, we were just starting to really find out what that probably should have looked like, having kind of made the mistakes and juggled, you know, how things worked in such a short time frame. So it was funny because in some respects it feels like you were just kind of getting into the stride, and then it ended. So yeah, I think I mean, they say that they miss us as well. So I'd like to. Is it just you, AJ?
No, they don't miss you. They tell me all the time, oh, thank God I'm not dealing with Gemma on a daily basis anymore.
I love the way you paint me out to be this villain. Like, Lucy will vouch for me. I am not that mean. I don't constantly swear. Thank you. Just, well, maybe not to everybody else.
Like, you're really good. You never hit me.
Yeah, look at the fear. Look at the fear.
Don't hit me.
Do not do that. That's so mean. If that is always directed at AJ, which is probably the right dynamic between production director and creative director, right? Like, but yeah, no, not to anybody else. No.
Lucy, I was going to ask you a question with regards. Obviously, AJ mentioned there was very, very few had ever actually worked on a full production title, or at least for a game before. How was the kind of development process and things for yourself from start to finish when you joined Dlala, and how has it kind of been on through that title? How was it to you? How have you found it?
Yeah, so I've worked on a lot of games, but I think this was probably the one I've given most time to. Yeah. The Gemma's laugh. It was really fun, and there was always something new. Like AJ was saying, not one person was doing one thing. I definitely did not just do one thing. And it's hard even thinking back, like storyboarding and like, I don't know, like mini game stuff. Yeah, so it was always something that was like fun and new and challenging. So yeah, they kind of got me to stay, like kept my interest. But it was nice. It was like a bit of a different experience for me because I felt like by the end I ended up with a lot of, I don't want to say a lot of responsibilities. I just meant like I had that freedom, which was great. Like I felt AJ trusted me, so he was just like saying we need this, and it was nice to kind of like try and figure it out and like go back to him like a picture thing or be like, look, this is what I think it should look like, or here are my suggestions, which was great. Yeah, I just felt like it really like became out. It wasn't like something that somebody was giving me some work and I had to do it. It was definitely a lot like coming from me, which just made it really fun, the whole process.
Awesome. And how have you found kind of working? You mentioned it's not been the first game you've worked on. So what other titles have you worked on in the past, and how did that kind of come into working on such a weird and wonderful title like this?
This is definitely very different to what I usually do. Even like in art, I feel like even before, like people struggle seeing how I worked on Battletoads. Like if they look at my personal work or like other stuff I've done. But I think that's why it was fun, right? It was like a new challenge. So yeah, it was very different. Like I always thought like creature design was not something I could do until I started doing it on the art test. And I just was like, oh my god, this is really fun, turns out.
I want to do more of this.
yeah, exactly. It's just because like the characters are also so weird that I could just like push like
Confirm.
weird directions, just like wacky stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it's not like something I've done before at all. But I definitely learned a lot. Like,
is that something that AJ is kind of pressing for you to do with this new project then? Is it right, okay, your lead weird creature animator? Is that
I think AJ, well, I think he's also trusted me on this one. And I like to think as art director, a lot of it is coming from me.
It's, you know, my approach with this for most of our leads is normally they're not leads, and then I start giving them some lead-like responsibility to see how they handle it. And then we have the conversation of, okay, I'm just going to be testing them. I'm not going to tell them that I'm testing them. But like if this goes well, they could be, you know, like Grant, when I offered him the promotion to lead designer a couple of years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, he was like, I've kind of felt like you've been testing me for like the last 6 months for this. And I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I've been doing. I just didn't want to tell you. Like, and with Lucy, like she came on and she really took like the strange thing with Dlala is in 8 years we've never had an art director, and it's crazy to think about, but we just haven't. Like Battletoads doesn't have a credited art director on it. There just wasn't one, and what that meant is like our more experienced artists really helped me out there. You know, Lucy wasn't just doing the job she was paid to do. She was helping give feedback to the other artists. She was doing stuff like color scripts. And, you know, Lucy initially came on for like, what was it, Jem? Like a month engagement, her first contract?
Yeah.
And now,
she's all the time.
Yeah. And she's, you know, I think Lucy told me like you normally stay on a project for like 6 months-ish, wasn't it, Lucy, right before us? And like you were on Battletoads over a year, weren't you? And then obviously she's just committed at least the next couple of years of her life to us. But yeah, but like it's completely earned. It's not like, you know, Lucy didn't come in and be demanding to be an art director. Like she just did a load of awesome stuff on Battletoads that really kind of showed me, oh, do you know what? Not only does she fill this massive gap we've always had as a studio, but she can handle how I work. You know, she can handle my briefs. She understands my feedback. She can translate AJ into visuals. And as stupid as it sounds, it's kind of something we've never had. We've never had someone that can work how I want to work and understand.
You're like a kind of mad scientist. Is that what you're saying?
I mean, it's basically like she's Frankenstein and I'm Frankenstein's monster, except for I'm now telling her how to make me. You know, and yeah, so like she kind of it was a no-brainer for me when we got this project. To be honest, on all the projects we had been pitching, you know, me and Jem and the other strategy team members had always been like, if we can get Lucy to be art director, we should get Lucy to be art director. You know, and then she was like, I'm not doing it. You need to triple my salary. And then I want 400
Get all sassy.
They were sending me contracts and I was just tearing them up. And I was like,
you just video called Gemma purely so Gemma could see her like but no, like, you know, it's important for us, you know, it's kind of like what Lucy said, like I don't like outsourcing. Like I don't like where you get a company, you give them a brief and then in a month you get a load of work. That's not how we work. Like even though it's a lot more stress for us, you know, and a lot more stress for Jem's department, she agrees that the way we work is like anyone on this project works as if they were here with us full time. So every contractor, like if we work with a team, like we work with Rumpus, a fantastic animation team in Bristol, even when they had like 9 people on project, every single one of them reported into Eric. They got managed by our production team, and like they were just part of our big team. So kind of like, yeah, you know, same with people like Lucy, like Karem, our UI UX director. He came on to do an initial contract in 2017 and he's still here. Liam, who's now full-time, because he actually likes us, Lucy, so he's agreed to be a full-timer. Liam came
on. I'm working full-time on the next project.
That's true. Liam did 3 days. Liam signed on to do 3 days of prototyping in 2018, and he ended up on the whole project. Then he went and got another job for 3 months, and then we poached him back from that job after 3 months to be a full timer. We try to hold on to the people that get us and who we like working with. And hopefully we make it a good place. Hopefully we're a good team to work with, and that's why it happens. But it's just super important for us that everyone has ownership and accountability of their own stuff. Like, if I could do everything, it wouldn't be as good, right? Like, my vision in my head would come out as good as it is in my head, whereas people like Lucy make it 10 times better than what I could have pictured.
Yeah.
I thought you were going to say if I could do everything, I would, because I'm the whole.
And how big is the studio now? How many people are working in the studio?
We got 23 that are on full-time payroll, and we've got a couple of people that, not having a dig, but like Lucy, aren't quite agreed to be on payroll with us yet, but are full-time on the project. We've got Lucy and Karem as well. So we're sort of, at the moment, sitting in pre-production for the new project. That's sort of our core team, 25.
And pre-production, how long are you off then to a final product? Is that a certain times schedule that you have? Let's say, okay, pre-production, and then after 3 years it needs to be out, or how does that look like?
Oh, 3 years. Could you imagine 3 years?
That would be nice. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's different from sort of deal to deal in some respects, but I think the problem is you kind of build a reputation of being able to achieve an awful lot in a short spell of time. And I think in some respects that's occasionally worked against us a little bit, because I think, where we're having a longer pre-production period would definitely be more beneficial. We sometimes struggle to negotiate that. And like AJ's saying, if you're not in the financial position to kind of contribute to the development fund substantially, it kind of doesn't give you as much power to kind of like really extend those periods, because what we really want to do is know exactly what we're making. Which what a dream, right? But in pre-production, what you want to know is exactly what you are making, so that you go into production with a nice clear plan, and then no changes to that plan.
I understand already, yeah.
But I mean, with games, that in itself is a mission, even if you've got a larger window with pre-production, right? That's hard to do for a number of reasons. So when you've got like shorter periods, but I don't think that in the time I've been with the studio, AJ says I don't think you've ever had a pre-production before I was here, right? But I think in the time they've been here, we never had more than 6 months basically for pre-production, which isn't a lot of time when you're trying to obviously figure out, like, that's all your systems, that's all your mechanics, that's all so it's hard to go into production without feeling like you're constantly reintroducing and in some respects starting something from scratch, because it's hard to cover what you need to, and essentially you end up doing mini pre-pros of things in production, especially when you're making lots of different game modes.
Like on this one, many different game modes.
Yeah, obviously, like with the type of deal that we have, you'd obviously, you'd have your pre-production phase, and then we try to basically build milestones around something that's going to make sense for us. But obviously you try to collaborate to find out like what the marketing plan is, so that are we going to need to create builds so that you can kind of try and like work out what your plan should look like around those things. Doesn't always work that way, because people do like to give you very short notice for things too, and you kind of just have to be responsive to that as well. But fortunately for us, because the team works so hard and so fast, I mean, especially coming from a completely different background, that's one of the things that always blows my mind with these guys, is obviously people doing a job that they're so ridiculously passionate about that you don't ever have that, you never get that, like, well, people are twiddling their thumbs, and people are literally like, I've done this, what's next? I've done this, what's next? It's almost sometimes like, woo, calm down. Like, it's the complete opposite. So
you just slow down a minute.
Whoa, let's just calm down. But yeah, so fortunately for us, we've always had like vast amounts of material to kind of like fall back on as well. But yeah, it's definitely a challenge because you have to build plans in order to win the contracts.
Exactly.
And from day one, you're already working to the plan. And that's, when I was talking to Paul Collins yesterday, he said, God, that's really hard to comprehend coming from obviously, Rare with Microsoft games and obviously having so much breathing space in defining like, what is this game? How should it feel? What should it look like? Having like so much breathing space. So I think, it's our strength that we do a lot and very quickly, but it's a challenge to try and start to lengthen those periods of time, get the bigger budgets, to give more breathing space. Because I think one of the things I know AJ would definitely say, and I'm sure Lucy, with the involvement she's had, would agree, is like, my God, like what could we do if we had, if we had a bit more time and a bit more money? I think we could do really, really good stuff.
But bigger is not always. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, and how does COVID, the pandemic, influence your job? How big of an impact is it?
It's weird. It's like the disclaimer I always give is we're super lucky, right? Because we can do our jobs.
Yeah.
And like that, we can't discredit that. There's a lot of people we know personally who aren't so lucky, who have been, they're out of work. But I hate working remote. I've always hated working remotely. As a team, we build off of being around each other. I mean, Lucy's a contractor. Lucy rented a house in the town the studio is to be here for pre-production, and then the lockdown happened. So since Lucy came down originally, she's not seen the team she's working with.
Oh, really? Whoa.
But like for us, yeah, we feed off of each other, right? Like people overhear conversations and get excited. They go to each other's machines. Like if a convo kicks up, you grab someone, you go into a room with a whiteboard, you write stuff on the wall. And we've lost all that. So kind of we've had to try and find a way to capture that creativity in a more structured format. Like, you can't really do that. It's not really ad hoc anymore. It's all like, it's all scheduled. And even if it's like, hey, let's have a meeting in 5 minutes, it's still different to just grabbing someone and going in a room there and then.
Sure.
The team have excelled. Like, look, the one thing I will say is, I've always hated remote. There's no remote working at Dlala. Like I'm quite, with the exception of our contractors, I don't like it. And the common misconception is because I don't trust the team. But it's never been about that. It's because we've done it twice before and we agreed as a studio, like it doesn't work. So it's always been my policy. And the team really proved the fact it's not about trust, because when we finished Battletoads, it was not a problem of like, oh, people are just going off and watching TV. It was more, we need to make sure people stop working. Like these people are just working. And the same thing's happening now, right? Everyone's giving it their all. They're all smashing it out the park. The work I'm seeing, week on week is just incredible. All my worries about can we do this remotely are gone in that sense. But you can't help but think in the back of your mind, if we're this good remote and we know we're better in person, like, what would we be doing right now if we were together? So, COVID has impacted us in that way. Like, I have no concerns about how well the team are doing and how good the game's going to be. But, we just miss being together, and there's definitely an element of Dlala that's missed when we're not all together. And what that means in terms of actual delivery, it's hard to tell, right? Like, we're going to hit our deadline. We're going to make an awesome game. But yeah, would we be further ahead? Would we be doing different stuff? Who knows? It's just that little niggling in uncertainty you have in the back of your mind.
Improvise, adapt, overcome.
There you go.
And the really sad thing, which is, for us as a studio, is, Battletoads was such a really big deal. And over the course of this, like AJ says, we're grateful that we've been able to work. We're grateful we were able to release the game still. We are super grateful, but obviously this was a really big milestone for Dlala Studios, finishing the game, releasing the game, and then ultimately, like AJ says, 1 million players in 6 weeks. All of this far exceeded, our expectations and our hopes. And we've not seen each other through any of this. And, it's a real sad thing because, you know, we would have really loved to have been together to celebrate this, and we will at some point, of course, when the time is right and it permits. But it's
We're allowed out to play.
If it ever happens, yeah.
Gives me time to get my Dark Queen cosplay down.
Roy, I think you had a question to ask anyway before both you and
Yeah,
Erwin kind of mix mash there.
It was a bit on the things that we were talking before, is that what could you do if you had the big budget, if you had the creativity, that go all out. I actually wonder if that actually would work. I've been in several teams as well on my work as well. I've had really big teams. I've had smaller teams. I've had a variation of smaller projects and bigger projects. And what I've noticed in time is that if you have those small teams, you have that mixture of being able to do different roles. And if you have those big teams and big budgets, you somehow become obligated to a certain role, and it becomes less interesting for a lot of people. And it might just even become less interesting for the people working on a project to be as creative as and how you did it right now is I wonder if you have really big budgets, is it still that much fun?
Yeah, look, right, if somebody was to give us 25 million,
Let's go.
No.
if someone was to call me up today and say, hey, AJ, here's 25 million, make whatever you want, what we wouldn't do is we wouldn't grow to 200 people.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we would never, you know, I've got to be careful with this because every time I say a number, we always grow bigger than it. Like, I don't see a world existing where this studio is ever bigger than 50 people, you know, and that would be doubling how big we are now. But I just don't see that exists. What time means for us is really, it's three things. So what money means for us is three things. It's time. Like, we need more time. Don't give us 2 years. Give us 3 years. Give us 3.5 years. Like, that's what the money makes for us. It means security. So first of all, it means knowing that we don't have to spend the last 6 months of whatever project we're on pitching for the next project. Like, it means we can build in the right sort of contingency. And the third thing, it means if we need people, we can get people. So if we're in the last half of a project and suddenly, you know, oh crap, we're falling short, we need, I was going to say art, but I won't because Lucy will be offended if I insinuate her art team. We need someone to go fetch AJ his golden milkshake. We could get somebody in short notice to do it. Like, you know, on the budgets we have, we're very lucky. We get really nice budgets, right? For the games we make, the size we are, we get nice budgets, bigger than a lot of other studios do our size. But we don't get a lot of room for error. We're not suddenly able to go, oh crap, we thought this would take 2 people when it actually needs 5. Like, we just have to go, okay, this really needs 5. We can maybe get another person, and then we need to figure out how to make 5 people's worth of work done by 3. That's what money would mean for us, right? It just means we do what we do and what we're good at, but we do it with more security and a little bit more time. You know, we're never going to spend 5 years on a game. We're never going to have 150 to 200 people on a project for the entire time. If we were to ever get that, like if we were to ever get bigger, even the 50, that's a world where we're probably working on 2 projects at once. That's not necessarily a world, you know, like you said, I love what we do, and I think what we do it very well. But I think the way we do it is because we're all so close. We all know each other. We can all talk to each other. We know everyone's strengths, and you lose that as you get bigger. And like, you know, we're 25 now. Once you get over like 30, 35 people, for every couple of people you're adding, you have to add like a layer of management. Like, and suddenly, you know, for us, like we have like our departments and we have our department leads. And then we have like, you know, me and Jem who sit separate to that to manage the high level stuff. If suddenly we're having to introduce, you know, like, okay, well, we've got this layer of management, then this layer of management, then this layer of management, then this, like, suddenly you have that dilution of, okay, well, AJ gave the game vision to this person who's then dispersed it to these 2 people, who's then dispersed it to these 3 people and like, we're not making our games anymore. We're just making some game for a lot of money. That being said, if Phil Spencer wants to buy Dlala for about, look, I know he spent a lot of money on Obsidian, 30 million.
But there's the money.
Yeah, they've got money left over from that TikTok deal that didn't go ahead.
Oh, I mean, look, you know, spent like what, 7.5 billion or whatever on Bethesda and ZeniMax. They must have some change left over from Microsoft Office.
$500 million, probably, yeah.
Look, you know, ZeniMax cost you billions, Dlala 30 million, sorted, deal.
I mean,
going off.
Oh, sorry, I was just
go on.
add something to ages from like an art point of view. Like if you have like more money and more time, I think so many great moments in gaming have come from people trying to find creative like solutions to limitations, whether that was money or tech or like time. So I always think that it's with more money you can do more stuff, but maybe you wouldn't explore ideas you would have to do now. So yeah, I think that's also like, to me, it's like the challenge is like part of the creative process.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've got to agree. I've in my normal day job, I'm a broker, and I've worked for PLC companies that report to the city with hundreds and hundreds of staff. And the process there compared to the company I'm working for now, which is 30 staff, give or take, is vastly different and in a better way. Personally, for me, the smaller company, you've got the transparency down the ranks straight away. If I want to go and see the managing director, I can go and see the managing director immediately. If I was to try and do that at the PLC company, I'd have to discuss that with his PA first. Even though I'm probably one of the people that's making him the money. And it's like, no, I've got to go all the way up here, and then I've got to speak to him, and then I've got to speak to him. And these larger game development companies, and unfortunately we have seen that within Microsoft IP recently, which is Halo Infinite, has been left in this kind of weird limbo stage where they've kind of got kind of conflicting rules and conflicting development points, and it's kind of a little bit of a mess right now, which is why they've brought in other people to oversee the project to kind of get it finished. But even then, there's kind of other conflicting departments. But when you've got a smaller studio, you don't have that issue. And I think that's another kind of thing that works more in the favor of smaller studios these days, is you don't have to report to 30, 40, 50 people to get something done. You can kind of in a non-COVID world, you can bring everyone into one little room and have that discussion if needs be, as opposed to a massive auditorium like some of these large companies have to do.
Yeah. Look, you know, you need us all, but you need all of the types of studio, right? Like, if there was only Dlalas in the world and you weren't getting Halos, you'd be really upset, right? Like, we need the Halos, we need the CODs, we need the FIFAs, because they bring people into the economy of games, and Battletoads exists because Game Pass did well, and Game Pass only did as well as it did because a giant like Microsoft did it, right? So you need those so that we can do what we do, and we get our money from those people. That, you know, our last few titles have been funded by some of the biggest companies in the world, so they couldn't survive just releasing Battletoads on Game Pass. They need their Halos, they need their blockbusters. And then you need the others as well. You need those little titles. You know, you need those really cool little indie games, because the little indie games don't put a lot of pressure on Halo, but they put a ton of pressure on us. Like, if there's really cool stuff coming out in the indie size, like, you know, these 1 or 2 person studios, like, that puts pressure on studios like us, because we're like, well, look, you know, we can't get complacent. We need to innovate, like, because these people just below us, they're only one deal away from replacing us. So we need to keep up and keep ahead. So I think the reason our industry works is because we have this lovely broad scale of companies. And there are, you know, there are people that are evil, and there are the wrong way to do things. And like, I think some of the big ones could do things a little bit better in terms of how they approach titles. But also, like, with stuff like Halo Infinite, God, like, I can't even imagine trying to make that game. Like, running that game, like, the amount, I mean, it's like Last of Us 2, right? Like, incredible game, but how many people worked on it? How do you lead that game? Like, you know, Neil Druckmann can get all the abuse in the world on the internet, but that guy, like, he took a vision and he executed it with, like, what, 1,000 people? Like, I mean, just getting the game shipped is an achievement when you can do that. So, you know, and also with Halo Infinite, like, remember, you didn't like Battletoads when you played it that much at X.019, but when it came out, so who knows? The Infinite could drop and it could be your favourite. So, yeah, I think our industry is just awesome because the 1,000-person studio exists, the 25-person studio exists, and the 2-person studio exists.
Yeah. No, I completely agree on that aspect. For me, it's more along the lines of it allows people to kind of have a much more transparent and easier vision for yourselves as well. If you, for instance, have that vision, but you've got to try and describe that vision to 1,000 staff, like Neil Druckmann did, that vision can often be diluted on occasion. You have far more voices getting involved in occasionally. And we have seen it before where that game doesn't turn out the way you want it to, and that's because too many people were involved. Mm-hmm. But likewise, of course, then and I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got. Is the next project a brand new IP? I know you can't discuss what it is yet, but is that a new game from scratch, or is that something that's been worked on before?
Gemma?
The best way I can put it is we have really enjoyed playing with other people's universes, and I feel it's a really good direction for us as a studio. I find original IP super engaging and interesting, but I think for us, our journey right now looks more like working with cool IP holders to make cool things.
Yes.
It sounded like you were reading a script then.
You wrote it? Gemma?
It's because it looks like Gemma's in a different room, but she's really like here with like a gun.
With the door open.
Stabbing him under the desk, really.
Yeah.
And is there a specific, let's say you also had with Grounded, right? It was more of a passion project. If you ever could do a passion project, in which genre are you then passionate about? Let's say, what is your ultimate passion?
Awesome, I can answer that one. I mean, look, obviously I love what we do anyway. This is passionate stuff. But if we were to do our own thing, I've always wanted to do like an adventure game one day, like a classic kind of 90s influence point and click. They're the reason I made games. They're the reason I love Tim Schafer as much. So I'd love to do one of them. I'd love for us to do like a 3D platformer. No, this isn't me confirming Banjo 3E. I'd love to do a 3D platformer. I know Ben, our tech director, like his bucket list goal is that we do a 3D platformer. Yeah, and then weird stuff. I've always wanted to do a wrestling game, as strange as it sounds, and I'm not sure necessarily we're there anymore. But like, yeah, I'd love to do a wrestling game. But yeah, I think if we were going to just flat out do kind of, hey, here's a load of money, make what you want, we'd do something very influenced by 90s point and click games, I think.
And for you, Lucy?
Well, I will go full time at Dlala when we make a dating game.
A dating game?
Dating game.
I think you'll have to direct that. I'm not sure I want to play a dating game that I've
a wrestling game. We can just, these could work together.
Oh,
yeah, that's a dating game.
That's got money written all over it. That has a wrestling dating game
in VR. Yes.
There you go.
That was fun.
You're back, Drew?
It went down.
Okay.
Gemma, what game are we making together? Like, what dating, wrestling, like, what else is there?
I think it's going to be a game that's 3D platformer where wrestlers go dating.
Oh, there you go. 3D platformer wrestling dating game. Confirmed. That's on.
Bring the bag of money.
Yeah. No, I'd definitely be on the platformer. I love old school platforming games. So doing something that, kind of brings 3D one sounds awesome.
And do you play games in your free time?
I'd love to
play free time.
I mean, I do. I play games whenever I can in my free time when it exists. But I'm also quite lucky that all my time really is just work and then playing video games, so I don't have a lot to deal with outside of that.
No.
Yeah. I started playing less games since I started working in games, for sure.
Yeah. Is that because you have less free time?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sorry, before I dropped off into the land of dead internet. I was asking there, sorry, if you did have the kind of the free time, what kind of title would you make then? Obviously, now you're going into hopefully brand new IP. Fingers crossed for yourselves if that is the case. What kind of game would you make if you had the opportunity to? If money was no object, like Broya was mentioning before.
Well, it sounds like from the three of us, we're making a 3D
wrestling dating game.
3D platforming wrestling dating game.
In VR.
Right.
In VR, yeah. Boy, I wanted to get it in VR as well.
I asked
So,
the same question, Drew.
I guess I've got to start working on that pitch. I'm not sure how our agent's going to feel about taking that out to sell it. I mean, so let me sit you down right now. Imagine this. Imagine it's Stone Cold Steve Austin, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, but there's some underlying sexual tension. However, to get to the
With the
restaurant,
moaning.
they've got to get up that mountain in front of you and collect the stars.
It's a journey they take together.
Yeah. Oh, it's got to have proper like indie storytelling in it as well, hasn't it? It's got to be like Dave Howsden does one of his typical orchestral scores, you know, which transitions into classic WWE 90s rock music as well.
And you can leave the sound effects in that you have to take out with Battletoads, right?
Yeah, we could take the groaning from the massage bar.
Oh,
So this is the story that AJ is telling Lucy.
I'm really concerned we're going to get an influx of resignations tomorrow now. Anyone who's in the studio has watched this, they'll be like, they have absolutely lost the plot. It's all been too much. Sorry, we're out. We don't want to make that game.
The team are going to be like, we need to stop what we're doing and just make this.
Yes.
Like, stop right now and let's get this going. I'll call the publisher, look, we're cancelling a new title. However, in its place, hear me out. And then,
But I think Phil Spencer always watches Midweek Mixup, so he will probably play you tomorrow. Yeah, he will send you emails ago.
it sounds like the perfect Game Pass title to me. When I'm browsing Game Pass, the first thing I always think is, what would happen if The Rock and Stone Cold Steve Austin went on a date on a mountain? And right now, I can answer that question. So
you've already started creating a story for it, which means you're sold on it.
I mean, I was sold a wrestling dating platform where I was sold. Like,
Help.
So it sounds like you've already come up with the game then. So now it's just getting it. Yeah, it's.
I mean, look, I'm not
getting it made.
I think we can make this for 15 mil. Like,
Yeah.
That's it.
15 mil, 3 years. I think we can make this work. We can get motion capture in it and everything. Not for the wrestling. The wrestling isn't motion capture. The dating is motion capture. Them sitting at a table, like clinking glasses, sharing spaghetti and meatballs. Like,
I can imagine the conversation, AJ telling this story to Lucy, and then saying, "So you visualize it? You know what I mean?" Oh, sure.
And she's like,
I can see it though.
yeah, exactly. I'll be like, look,
She's already drawing something down on a pad.
I can't tell you how often this kind of stuff happens, though, right? If you're sitting in a room having a catch up with AJ and the lead designer Grant, and you're actually talking about what you're working on, and then it just goes into the realms of I can't even tell you. Beyond this, oh my goodness! Like you just sit there and you're like, guys,
I don't want to give you.
come back, come on, come back. Yeah, but you know, come back.
But she's talking about a certain conversation about Dash Dolphin, the Dolphin detective.
Yeah.
So this is probably mine and Grant's best idea. Now, it's a side mission thing. It's Dash Dolphin. He's like a 1950s detective, but he's a dolphin. He just wears the detective hat and jacket. And his wife and kid were killed in a tuna fishing accident. And so he's had an alcohol problem ever since. And it's just, that's it. That's the whole premise. He's just a normal detective, except he's not got legs. He's just a dolphin. So he's not that useful unless the crime takes place in the sea. So, like, but that's the whole premise. It's just.
and how does he drink? Because he only got fins, right?
Well, don't be speciesy, first of all. If he wants to drink, yeah, he'll find a way.
Okay.
Life finds a way.
Make that happen.
Exactly.
Alcoholism finds a way.
But Dash Dolphin, we weren't
That's the
actually.
answer. whenever we say that, but how does that actually work? It's like games.
Yeah, exactly.
Game.
Improvise and then
Yeah.
overcome.
That doesn't make any sense. Well, it does in this game.
Includes a really long straw and kind of some kind of flipper holder onto his cup. That's it.
Look, you can insult my ideas, but he's bang on Dash Dolphin right now. He's always thinking about Dash Dolphin. And he'll be thinking about it later.
Yeah. For sure.
Yes. Oh my god.
That's the quality we come up with.
It is. But to be fair, it's to the mind of development, and that's exactly why we have you on the show, is to find out what goes on in the full process, top to bottom. And it can get a bit crazy, and the conversations can go a bit wild. But to be fair, I mean, you've probably seen the kind of developer diary behind God of War with Corey. I think it was Raising Kratos. Have you seen that? And that's that's very similar across the board. He's a bit wacky as well. He's mad. His ideas can often go off the charts. But very, very simple. That's a very good kind of depiction of what development is like, and how he also has that same relationship with one of the others. I've forgotten what her name is actually. Is it Sue? The lady he works with? But exactly,
isn't it?
Yeah, exactly the same thing. It's the relationship between those two. She's trying to keep him reined in, and he's just like going wild around the studio. And I can kind of picture Gemma being like that. Just AJ, sit down, sit. Come on.
You have to have it though. Like, there's the cliche. Like you have to have like. I don't work unless I've got someone restricting me, because it's like George Lucas, right? The best. I'm not comparing myself to George Lucas. I mean, I wish. Like the best Star Wars films were the one where people said no to George Lucas, where like he'd have these ideas, they'd say no to 50 of them, but the 5 that got in gave us the original trilogy. And then, we saw what happened when he didn't have that, and it, became the prequels. And it's the same thing with us, right? Like, if I'm just unbridled, completely unrestricted creativity, then all my bad ideas go in the game, and we don't want all my bad ideas to go in the game. What we want is someone to be saying, you haven't got time for 400 ideas, you've got time for 20. And then I have to really make the decision, well, what 20 ideas go in? Number 1, Dash Dolphin, in. But, so you need that partnership. And when you first start out, you don't as much, because you can spend 6 years making a game on your own or with a mate in your garage. But when you're actually doing games to deadlines, like, you have to have people reining it in. And, producers, as much as Gemma says I make her out to be the villain, like, production plays a very important part in that. Like, we're creatives, don't make games. Like, we don't. We come up with ideas. That's what we do. And we're quite lucky we understand how those ideas work in a sense of games. Producers ship games. Like, without production, the game doesn't come out. The game doesn't get made. Like, what happens is stuff gets thrown in, and then somebody eventually tells you you've run out of money, and you go, ah, and you run around like Kermit the Frog. So yeah, like, you need that. It's that yin and yang. For as cliche as it sounds, it is completely like, here's all your crazy ideas. Now this person's going to help you turn that into something actually tangible that can be released to the public.
Drew?
Oh, he's going.
Yeah.
Going. I know his connection's bad, but actually looks like he's falling asleep. He's like,
it's really bad.
Can you hear us, Drew, or no?
oh, he's frozen again.
No, we lost him. Houston, we got a problem.
It's all right. If you ask me a question, he can come back and ask the exact same question.
That was a coincidence, huh? And we didn't have any script at all, so.
He's going to come back on and now ask me the question he just asked me, and he'll be like, "So, producer,
I'm back again now. No, I'm back again. This is ridiculous. This, dear me." We'll get there eventually. I've never known nothing like it. Anyway.
It's okay. Okay, we're still here. We're still going.
I'm gonna have to let kind of Broy and Erwin take charge here for a second. This is just this is getting a bit mad.
It's very 2020 for sure.
Now, how do those? We talked a bit about the COVID situation. How do you do those creativity moments? Since what you said, we all have to overcome and change a bit on how we work, and you want to prevent everyone keep on working, and that you have the best combination of free time and working. But how do you get creative in a team if you can't come together? Since this is something actually I'm struggling with my team, so I'm wondering how you do it. So it might be, even if it's a different working environment, I might learn something about it, how to do it. So I see those creative boards behind you, but are you using those actually, and how does it work?
Well, I'm using my stuff, but to be honest, Lucy's probably the best suited to answer this because she's obviously managing the artists who have got quite a hard job to do. So yeah, Lucy, how are you finding this stuff?
Yeah, it's definitely. So I always work remotely, and it was fine. But then as soon as you need to start production on a new thing and you don't know what this thing is and you need to figure that out, it's really hard. Kind of having these conversations. I mean, luckily, just like video calls and all that help, but I'm not gonna lie, it would be much better being in a studio because then you're like constantly feeding off each other, like each other's creativity and like kind of inspiring each other, which is what we're trying to emulate online now.
But how do you do it? Those things is the things that I think are really difficult. It's you go to the coffee machine, you talk while having a coffee. How was the weekend? How are you doing? Hey, I'm working on this. It's so cool, this and that, and then you get those unintended moments. And if you call someone, we have the meetings, and not everyone is a big fan of it, but I always put on the camera just to have that bit intimate calling experience or being a bit closer. But it's always, if you call someone, it's with an intention to call someone about something. It's the spontaneous. It's not always there. How do you, especially when you need to be creative, how do you do it? I don't think there's a fitting answer for it, but I'm just curious how people work with it.
No, that's a good question because like that's something I'm personally still struggling with, and I think the art team generally. But I have found a lot of times having conversations and then just kind of chatting to people, like finishing the meeting early, or sometimes with AJ, like we talk about some stuff and then we kind of go off on a tangent, and those are usually the most productive times. Because then you just let your brain, you like talk about stuff, like weird ideas and random thoughts. And I think that's where like most of the good stuff is. Because again, you're kind of giving your brain that like chance to like vomit everything at someone and hear your own thoughts. But yeah, no, I completely agree. Like there's no way you can emulate that kind of being around others and kind of seeing what they're working on and like talking to them. It's not the same.
I think internet connection permitting, obviously, you have like some groups tend to stay on calls for like hours and hours, not because they've got that intention of discussing something, but just so that they're all like together, and then they'll just randomly talk. Did you see this last night? Blah, blah, which like you say stems into other things. So I know lots of people tend to do that, so that you're still trying to get some of that organic discussion. Like Lucy said, should we just stay on the call? Like you carry on, I carry on, like, and sometimes stuff comes from that, but that's quite hard. I think the other thing, Lucy, I don't know if you agree with this, but it's the tool side of things to try and make sure that you can effectively see over each other's shoulders still. So like for Lucy's team, they use Sync Sketch. which is obviously a really useful tool in terms of everybody being able to see something live. So it could very well be like you having that daily catch up where people go and stand around a desk and they're like, this is this, this is that. They're still kind of getting that. And then, like you say about these like whiteboard boards and things, one of the things we were keen to do is, you know, at the moment we're not using any kind of project management software that we've used before to develop, because we were very much like, right, if we were in the studio now, how would we be working? And we would be doing this on the walls. And the stuff that's on my walls is actually really boring, like draft, contract, template, agreement. And yeah, so my wall is used for that, not very innovative stuff right now. But all the creative stuff is actually in something called Miro at the moment, which I don't know if you've heard of that one, but basically it's like unlimited amount of whiteboard, if that makes sense. And so you can kind of, you know, what we're looking at is building out like question trees and thought trees and things like this to help everybody be able to still see that information. So it's very much like, you know, where we'd have the whiteboard that everybody goes to, or at the end of a project we have like the war room where everything's on the wall saying, these are the deadlines, guys, just in case you forgot, these are the deadlines and that's the deadline. So, you know, like you've got that visibility still where someone goes to one page and they've got all of the information. So I think it's still relatively early days in using that stuff, but I think it's help, you know, to create some of that we're missing. It definitely doesn't replace it, but we're trying. We're trying.
Yeah, we did. I was gonna say, like, we also did like Jamboard where we're all drawing at the same time, and you can see each other's like drawing. And I think like that was really useful. Like people just found it very inspiring. I was telling, like, because I had to be away for a bit, and I thought maybe the office would open before like lockdown and everything. I did talk to Chris, the art manager, and I told him that I was gonna put like a tablet of just my face, like just like me video chat the whole time while he's in the office. Like I can see people and people can see me just like around his neck. Unfortunately, that's not happened yet, but we'll see.
Yeah, mate. Well, thankfully, I've managed to get the internet working again. No idea what happened there, but thanks for being with us. No, I'm really keen to see what you guys are working on and how you're going to kind of cope with, again, the kind of pandemic, especially pre-production stage. I'd imagine that's kind of one of the worst points to be in lockdown, is it not? Trying to get all of your ideas together and then map out a game in pre-production during what would effectively be remote working throughout that entirety of pre-production, at least the vast majority of it. How long is pre-production for yourselves then, or how long do you want to have it down to for this new title?
I mean,
go on.
Go on.
Is that because if I breach contract?
Read the script.
Yeah, I was like, never like this.
Without being too precise, it's more than half a year, but not quite a full year, is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
Okay, so 3/4 of a year. Brilliant.
A red dot's just going to, and the sniper's just going to take me.
Not enough. It's just never enough, though, pre-production, right? So I think that's the right answer.
Yeah, no. It's, again, I don't know whether or not, obviously, internet unfortunately cut out before, but I was asking kind of the IP that you're making this time around, is that a new IP then, or is that something that you're working on with another company? Or is that something more, right, this is what I want to do this time, as opposed to just, okay, I'm really excited and really want to work on Battletoads, for instance, like this was last time?
We can't go into too much detail about
Of course.
They told us, but they told us not to tell you.
Understandable.
You know, like we've found kind of like the style and the way that Dlala work is working, and so we're not going to deviate too far from that. All I will say is that, like, even when we're doing products of other people's IP, we're only taking opportunities where we can treat them like they're our own. And that's what we did with Battletoads. We weren't and I think for us as a studio, that's the best way forward right now. Like, doing those sort of projects is where I'm having the most fun, and I think as a studio we have the best strength.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, that's intriguing to know. And is this to yourselves? Is it you preferably want it to be maybe just a 3-year development cycle this time around? Then would that be enough time for this game? Or
what we think is enough isn't necessarily what we get. With somebody else's funding, it's very much about kind of when they need the game out and what they want to pay for it.
Yeah.
So, this one is unlikely to be 3 years. It's unlikely to be that long. I think right now we feel like it's going to be a little bit longer than Battletoads, probably. Is that right, Jem, to say? Just a little bit longer than Battletoads?
Yeah, fractionally.
You're like,
The mystery.
just loading up a sniper rifle there. Just keep going. No. It's to be fair, I'm very intrigued to see what you come up with. The art style was mad. The humor was one of the things that I love about not only just raid titles but of course Battletoads. The humor in this game, was that a mad concoction of everybody's ideas in the office, or was that one person that you got to kind of do the script and write all the jokes? Or
so we had 3 writers. We had an amazing writing team. So Tom Kaufman was our lead writer. So Tom was one of the main writers on the first 3 seasons of Rick and Morty. He was lead writer on Marvel's Loki that's coming out soon. And he's done a lot of cartoons. And then we have Kelsey Abbott. So Kelsey has done stuff for Cartoon Network, for Netflix. And Wade Randolph is the same. He's done a lot of stuff for the cartoon side of things. He's worked on stuff like Community. So they were like our writing team. And then I just worked with them to help translate kind of the way that cartoon writers write stuff into a video game. So I imagine anything you found really, really funny came from them, and anything you found really cheesy and too full breaking came from me. But yeah, I mean, look, they were incredible. Like, they're amazing writers. They've worked on stuff I love. They've never done a game before, but like they knew how to write funny TV, and like they really shaped. They gave Rash, Pimple, Zitz, DQ like personality that they didn't have a chance to have in the 90s because the storytelling format wasn't there. So yeah, like, there's stuff in there that, still makes me laugh to this day. Like, the spoilers, the bit in DQ's hideout where, Rash tells Pimple to punch him through the brain. Like, first time I read that script, I laughed out loud. Then I heard the scratch VO and I laughed out loud. Then I heard the proper VO and I laughed out loud. Then I saw the storyboards. Every stage of that joke just made me laugh. And that joke is what the game is for me. It's just stupidity. Like, makes no sense, has no lasting effect. It's just really, really stupid. But like, that's what our game was to me. Just this concept of like, what can we do right now that is stupid? Yeah, we had written on a big blackboard in our office, does this make you say stupid game? And the rule was, every time you were playing something, you'd always hear from some part of the office, someone would go, oh, stupid game. And that's what we were. And so like the script was like the epitome of that, right? The script was just stupid, funny jokes, just the 3 Toads and Dark Queen who should never have been working together, put in this uneasy alliance where they had to kind of make it work. And then it was just ridiculous. We threw a death cult in there, we threw in an unconscious diplomat, like, that was my Weekend at Bernie's homage. Tom, our lead writer, I said to him, like, look, you gotta give me a Weekend at Bernie's homage. I want someone to be unconscious, but they need to do lots of things. And then the next thing we know, we're bobsledding on the back of an unconscious diplomat. So it's just a stupid game. But yeah, all the writing, the best stuff came from those 3, and they absolutely knocked it out of the park.
Drew, before you ask the next question, I will head off.
That's no problem, buddy.
It's 11 p.m. over here. I need to get up really early in the morning. So I would like to thank the chat also for being on the show, and also the wonderful guest. Super nice to meet you, and lovely people. And I wish you all the best in this pandemic times and the development on your next game. So I wish you all the best. It was great seeing you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye, Aaron.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. And to be fair, we're going into the stage where we are wrapping up, because I do realise, thankfully, of course, the vast majority of us are in the UK, but we still have Broyer as well, who's in over in Europe there, and it's 11 o'clock as well for him. So I do know it's late night. It's always late nights for us, and I know it's especially late nights for developers. So
with all the bad stuff going on with COVID, there's one benefit: getting up early. I don't have to commute to work, so it's it's getting up, putting on my sweatpants. No.
You're not wearing sweatpants and then a shirt, no.
Having some flashbacks of some team meetings that I've had.
You have done that.
Yeah. I'm in my pajamas for a lot of meetings.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Pajama pants and a dice top.
I mean, AJ will confess that even before lockdown, he sometimes came into the office wearing his pajamas.
Yeah,
like Batman pajamas you're wearing, AJ. Yeah.
Batman pajamas. You know, sometimes it's the most appropriate office wear.
I will remember that. If you remember that when I come in the office in like my dressing gown, just
like it's a casual work environment. You know, if you want to wear your PJs, wear your PJs.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much to Lucy, AJ, and Gemma for coming along today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and thank you for putting up with my what ended up being horrific internet connection this evening. But it sounded, I did capture the part where you said, "Am I just falling asleep?" No, I wasn't. Even though the camera made it look that way.
I was waiting till the cat jumping by. So.
No, but thank you very much for coming along. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys have up your sleeves for your next game. But I will go into my outros. So first of all, Lucy, thank you very much for coming along tonight. If you let know people where they can find you and even where they can find some of your work. I know you've got a lot of kind of artwork and things that you've done in the past as well that people can find and have a look at and look at, see what you can do.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. That was really fun. And I'm sorry if I was yawning in his 10 p.m. and I've just had a long day. But it had nothing to do with the company. That was great. I guess like I am on Twitter a lot. At Lucy Does Arts. And if people want to see art, then I post stuff that's not under NDA on Instagram at @lucy, I think. Yeah.
Awesome. AJ, if you can let, I know you can't tell people anything of what you're doing, not officially. Gemma's just kind of looking ready, just sharpening a knife. If you can let people know where they can find you and what, obviously we can't know what you're getting up to at the moment, but
yeah. I mean, for me it's Twitter, it's Dnost, so DNOST, and then obviously twitter.com/Dlala Studios. Obviously Battletoads is available on Xbox Game Pass, Xbox Store, Windows Store, and Steam. Definitely get it on Game Pass. It's basically free if you've got a Game Pass subscription, or just pay for a month's Game Pass subscription and play it. It's definitely the best way to get it. Yeah, that's me.
Awesome. And last but not least, Gemma, thank you very much for coming along and keeping AJ in his reins.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to keep him. Quite often I hear he's going off to do these things, I'm like, oh God. So thanks for including production as well, because we don't often get involved in this kind of stuff, and we enjoy it very much. So thank you for having us. Obviously, like AJ, there's very little I can talk about at the moment, but I love it when people do reach out. Best way to get hold of me is probably via Dlala's Twitter, I would imagine. So yeah, if you can send a message through there, it'd be great to hear from people.
Awesome. I always wondered who ran that, whether or not it was AJ or somebody else, because I've got to run 2 Twitters at the same time as well. So it was like, you
can tell quite often when I'm doing it, because I often post from both my accounts and get it the wrong way round. So
yeah, I do that sometimes.
Yeah, excellent.
Awesome. And Broya, last but not least, buddy, if you can just let people know where to find you and what you've got coming up.
I'm just getting settled in my new house, so I'm currently only on Twitter with Broya at Broya Xbox. Mostly retweeting and becoming a bit more active recently. Now everything's getting settled. Really honored to be in this week's podcast. I really loved the feedback that you gave, and really congrats again on the game. Most definitely will be playing it for certain in the near future again with my kids. They loved it. We will still be playing it, and I'm really looking forward to what's coming up next. So yeah, really good luck with all the stuff going on there.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And thank you again to the chat as well tonight. It was great seeing you all. And we shall see you again next week. Thank you again, everybody, and have a good night.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.